as he told her that he wished he had finished the job and thrown her.
Someone actually spoke those words. He said them to his wife while they were out on the boat. It was the very next morning after he had strangled her so hard, she felt her neck literally crack. That was 1 year and 6 months ago. 6 weeks back, she vanished from that very same vessel. Now, before we go any further, Brian Hooker has not been officially charged with any crime. His legal counsel, Terrell Butler, has put it on the record that his client absolutely and completely denies doing anything wrong. Everything you hear from Lynette's family in this episode is their own personal testimony, and we are presenting it as exactly that. There is one particular word in that statement that most news reports haven't slowed down long enough to really look at. And no, it is not the word overboard. That is the word that has been splashed across every single headline, every TV segment, and every deep dive into this case since April 5th. It makes sense, obviously, since Lynette Hooker went missing right off the water. Her husband admitted 18 months before she vanished that he wished he had put her there. Overboard is the word that defines the kind of story we are dealing with. But if you want to know what was actually going through his head when he spoke, that deeper meaning isn't found in the word overboard. It is job. I wish I had finished the job. Think about that. Let it sink in for a second. See, a job is not just a sudden explosion of anger. A job isn't something that just slips out of a person's mouth before they can catch themselves, during a screaming match or in the chaotic rush of a fight that spiraled out of control. We use the phrase crimes of passion for a specific reason. They are meant to be totally unplanned, reckless, and born from a moment so intense that the person isn't really making conscious or logical choices anymore. Whatever went down on that boat that following morning sure wasn't a heat-of-the-moment situation. The morning after is when all that initial fire has finally burned out. You have slept on it. Any excuse a person tries to grab, like being wasted or just losing their grip on reality, or claiming they just snapped, those excuses don't hold any weight once the sun comes up. A job is intentional. A job takes a plan. Doing a job means looking at what you intended to accomplish, checking if you actually got it done. And if the answer is no, saying you plan to go back and wrap it up. So when Brian Hooker stood there on the deck the morning after nearly killing his wife and told her he wished he'd finished the job by tossing her in the ocean, he wasn't just having some flashback to a temporary lapse in his sanity. He was talking about a task he hadn't completed. He wasn't apologizing for losing his cool. He was admitting he was sorry he stopped. He picked that word, job, after a full night's sleep, knowing exactly what it meant and exactly who was listening. And the woman standing right there, his wife with a broken neck, trying to pack her things, she heard every word, burned it into her memory, and told her mom. And that mother, she never let it go. Darlene Hamlet, Lynette's 76-year-old mother, sat down with Ashley Banfield for the Drop Dead Serious podcast and recounted exactly what her daughter said, word for word, right there on the record. No hesitation, no legal team feeding her lines, and definitely no PR script. It was just a mother telling the raw truth about her daughter's life. And you can bet the detectives are paying attention. There is actually another side to that word, job, that is worth. We need to look closely at this before we get into the nitty-gritty of Hamlet's story. It matters because the words themselves pull back the curtain on the speaker's mind. Look, when you call something a job, you're saying you are the one meant to handle it. Jobs aren't just things that happen to you out of the blue. A job is a choice. It is something you actively step into. It implies you own the result. It is an admission that what happens next is on you, and if it fails, it is not because you didn't mean well. It is because you didn't pull it off correctly. Brian Hooker didn't stand there saying he wished things had turned out better that night. He didn't say he wished his wife was okay. He said he wished he'd finished what he started. That is first-person, active voice. He is the center of the whole sentence. The action, the verb, is just something he decided to leave incomplete. Think about phrasing. He said it the next morning, right after waking up on that same boat where all that violence went down just hours before. That is the kind of chilling evidence that lawyers and behavioral experts spend their whole lives trying to explain to a jury in a way they can actually grasp. Brian basically did the heavy lifting for them. He laid out his intentions so plainly that even his mother-in-law could not forget it. It was so hauntingly specific that she repeated it back, word for word, to Ashley Banfield. There is absolutely no room to misunderstand what he was getting at. Darlene Hamlet isn't just some background character in this whole mess. She is not the grieving relative who cries once on camera and then disappears from the public spotlight. This 76-year-old woman has spent every day since April 5th acting as a boots-on-the-ground investigator, digging up text threads and scrolling through social media to help the Coast Guard piece together exactly where they went, even flying down to the Bahamian consulate in Miami. She is chasing every lead a regular person can find without having a badge or a gun. She knows the truth about this marriage because she is the one her daughter told everything to. There are things she let slip on the Banfield podcast that people just are not talking about enough in the news right now. These details show more than just the what of the crime. They show how deep this went and just how much Lynette knew about the danger she was in. See, Lynette documented her own hell. She took photos of her injuries, but not for the cops, or for some future court case, but for herself. She had been through this cycle enough times to realize something most people cannot even put into words. She knew that the version of her marriage during the quiet times was a total lie compared to the version she lived in the dark moments. And on a good day, while standing in the sun, looking at the life she had spent 25 years building on that boat with her husband right there, it was honestly hard to remember just how terrifying those bad days actually felt. So, she made a record. She kept proof of what he did, just so she could not trick herself into thinking it was not that bad. That is a very deliberate, very smart way to handle a terrifyingly real situation. This was not someone who was confused about what was going on. This was a woman who saw the reality of her life with perfect clarity, who was not lying to herself about what this union really held, and who was actively trying to shield herself from the very... Humans have this strange habit of forgetting the very things we really should keep in mind. Hamlet backed this up during her podcast appearance. She also went on record with CBS 8 and WTO, confirming the marriage was a cycle of physical and mental abuse that led to several breakups. The last split happened about 1.5 years ago, which matches up with the time frame of the story she shared with Banfield. My daughter's marriage? It was a total roller coaster, so many ups and downs. When things were good, they were great. But the bad times were just awful. She actually walked out on him plenty of times. A reporter once asked Hamlet if she ever felt uneasy about Lynette during those sailing trips, knowing what she knew about their history. And her response wasn't the kind where someone has to stop and think of the right words. She didn't hesitate. She said, "Are you serious? I was terrified every single day, every time we said goodbye." Then she told the podcast something that carries even more weight than that. She explained that every time Lynette headed back to the Bahamas, and I mean every single time, not just once in a while or when things were especially bad, but every trip. I honestly thought it would be the final time I'd ever see my daughter alive. Did you ever tell her that? She truly believed it might be the last time she saw her. Just imagine living with that kind of dread. Watching your own child head right back into a situation you know is toxic. Something you have heard about in painful detail. Something you have spent years stressing and fighting over. 2. Stand there and wonder if this is the trip she never comes home from. But you can't stop her because she is a grown woman, because it's her own life, because love is not about control. Besides, walking away from a 25-year marriage while living on a boat in the Bahamas isn't as simple as just wanting out. Darlene Hamlet lived with that weight every single day. Honestly, she still is. Talking to Ashley Banfield is her way of making sure the terror she lived with for years is finally documented in the official case files. About 18 months ago, Brian and Lynette were aboard the Soulmate. They had both been drinking. A fight broke out. But this wasn't just some disagreement that got out of hand by mistake. What Darlene told Ashley Banfield was a brutal, detailed account of physical violence and what happened right after. Brian slammed Lynette down onto the bench in the boat's kitchen area. Hamlet was really precise about where exactly this happened. It's one of those wraparound benches you find by the table on a boat like the Soulmate. She hit the bench, Brian pinned her down, and he started strangling her. They were fighting and he just tossed her onto the bench. It was a wooden seat. The kind you'd see in a camper, right? Boats like that have these little booths in the galley area. and that is where she fell, onto that wood. He was right on top of her, his hands around her throat, choking her, and she actually felt something in her neck crack. While he was strangling her, Lynette felt a crack in her neck. Her neck was stiff for a long time after that. You don't just walk away from something like that. It's serious. In cases of domestic abuse, strangulation stands out as a critical medical red flag for serious assault. It isn't just about the visible marks it leaves behind on the skin, but rather what the act itself reveals about someone's deadly intentions. Choking someone isn't just a quick punch. It isn't a simple push. It takes constant physical force, holding that pressure, and making a conscious choice to keep going. The parts of the neck that actually crack under that kind of pressure are vital to survival. That night left Lynette Hooker struggling with an injury that ruined her ability to move for weeks. Not hours, but weeks. She told her mom everything in such vivid detail that Darlene Hamlet could tell Ashley Banfield years later effortlessly. The bench, the galley, their positions, the sound, the weeks she spent unable to move. This isn't just some vague story told once and mostly forgotten over time. These are specific, clear-cut facts from a story told with precision, and they stuck because the woman listening knew she had to remember every single word. Most people miss the geographic reality of what happened on the Soulmate that night. A 50-foot sailing vessel, anchored in the middle of nowhere near a Bahamian island, is nothing like being in a Michigan suburban home. You don't have neighbors who can hear a scream through the walls. No one is walking by on the sidewalk outside. There is simply no way to step out the door and get away from the person who hurt you. A yacht sitting at anchor, a lifestyle that seemed like total freedom on Instagram, becomes a terrifying geographic cage for any woman stuck with a dangerous partner. When your neck is cracked and there is no cell service, the only way off that boat in the dark is into the water, and that is exactly where she ended up. No police were called, no doctor ever saw the injuries on the record. She just took some photos, called her mom, and remained on the vessel that evening. Hamlet explained that part very clearly during the podcast. I can't explain how or why, but she just stayed on the boat. I cannot tell you how or why she stayed, but she did. And the next morning they both worked together to pack her things. He even helped her do it. That line, spoken by a woman who has clearly replayed it in her head countless times, carries the heavy burden of trying to grasp why anyone would stay in that situation. Why, even after your neck is literally broken, you stay right where it happened. All the studies show the same thing. While it's hard to explain the emotions, leaving isn't just one quick choice you make and then finish. It's a long process that takes actual resources, careful planning, and needing to see a future that feels more real than the terrifying right now. Trapped on a boat in the pitch black with absolutely no escape route, the way you weigh your options is totally different than it would be on land. Lynette Hooker simply did what she thought she had to do. The following morning, as she packed her bags to leave, he told her what he really wanted. Just hours after he strangled her while they were still on that boat, Brian Hooker told Lynette he wished he had just finished her off and tossed her into the sea. Darlene Hamlet repeated those very words during her talk with Ashley Banfield. No holding back, no sugarcoating, zero excuses. I should have finished the job and tossed her overboard. That is exactly what he told her, expressing regret that he hadn't just gotten rid of her. Back on the Soulmate, about 18 months before Lynette Hooker vanished from that very boat, the prosecution refers to this as evidence of prior bad acts. Legally, the goal here is to prove that the intent was already there long before the actual crime happened. It shows a target was chosen. It shows a method was already planned out. Essentially, what went down wasn't some random fluke. It had a dark history behind it. Brian Hooker's words on that deck weren't vague or open to multiple meanings. You don't need to overanalyze it. He picked the method, throwing, and he specified where. Right over the side. He looked right at the person, the woman standing there packing her things. Calling what he did the previous night a job suggests it was a task with a goal, one he hadn't quite finished yet. He made it chillingly clear. He wasn't sorry for the violence, just for failing. Just 6 weeks before Lynette went missing from the vessel, she bought a single ticket back home but never actually got on. Way before that, she mentioned to her daughter a threat he'd leveled a year prior. 18 months earlier, she felt her neck literally crack. yet she stayed on board regardless. Right now, the active investigation led by the Royal Bahamas Police and United States Coast Guard is tracing exactly what that timeline, that 18-month stretch from that morning on the Soulmate to the night of April 4th, really means when you consider the terrifying things Brian told her before she vanished. Lynette Hooker's Instagram page is still live. All the photos are still up. Lynette swimming through blue water in her snorkel gear. There she is on the bow at sunset, arms wide open against a massive sky. You see her pointing at a manatee with this look of pure, unscripted joy. It's visible in her energy and the quick way she moved around, just looking straight into the lens, wanting to share that moment with everyone. She called the sea her happy place, and you can tell she meant it. Each video clip proves it. The life she was carving out on that boat, that sense of adventure and the freedom of a new horizon really meant something to her. But both stories were true at the exact same time. The person laughing on camera was also secretly documenting her own bruises in a private folder. This woman, living the dream, was the same one who confided in her mother about that terrifying morning in the galley when she felt her neck crack. The woman who posted she wasn't leaving anytime soon on April 3rd, just one day before vanishing, was the same person who'd bought a one-way plane ticket back in March but decided not to go. Darlene Hamlet spoke about that ticket during her appearance on the Banfield podcast. There was no return flight scheduled and no specific event she was heading home for. It was a one-way ticket, the kind of thing you buy when making a choice, not a vacation. It's a move someone makes when they've finally decided that things are going to be different, that the life back home matters more than the one they're fleeing. But she never got on. From the moment she bought that ticket until the night of April 4th, something kept Lynette Hooker on the boat. We have no public record of what that was. Not a single person in her life has come forward to explain what happened between booking that flight and the choice to skip it. That one-way trip back home to Miami that never actually happened. She just never got on. I cannot tell you exactly why, but she was not on that plane. What we do have is proof of a woman who had been planning her escape for a long time. Those photographs, the distance, the calls home to her mother, that talk with her daughter about a threat from the year before, the March ticket. Everything was heading in one direction. Then April 4th hit. Her final YouTube video was posted on March 9th, about 3.5 weeks before she vanished. It is 3 minutes of Lynette paddleboarding in the Bahamas, laughing and showing off wildlife to the camera. Her final short was a clip she titled, "Dance Party." The text on the screen said, "Don't you two ever get tired of each other?" That was Lynette's humor, warm, a little bit self-deprecating, and totally authentic. That caption was not some fake act. The joy in those clips was real. The ease was real. But the injury on her neck from the boat bench was also real. And those pictures she took of her own bruises? Also very real. Both of those realities existed within the same woman and the same marriage at the exact same time. This case forces you to wrap your head around that. Two versions of a life that were both true, both happening right then, and both part of the same story. Investigators trying to figure out April 4th cannot just look at her Instagram feed. They need the full picture. And that picture includes a statement from the man who was on that boat when she vanished. A statement made on that same deck 18 months before she went into the water. Anyone following this story knows what Brian Hooker claims happened that night on April 4th. He says he and Lynette left Hopetown around 7:30 in, their 8-foot hard-bottom dinghy, heading for the Soulmate anchored near Elbow Key, about 2.5 miles away. Neither of them had life jackets on. Winds were hitting 20 miles per hour. Waves were 3 feet. The sun had already gone down. According to what he told police, Lynette just fell overboard. The safety lanyard killed the motor when she fell, leaving him stranded. He says he tossed a flotation device her way. He claims he saw her swimming toward the boat about 1,000 yards off before he lost her in the dark. Everything that followed was what he called a cascade of failures in a recorded call later leaked to the press, including a broken oar pin, an anchor that would not grab, and flares that were ignored. He drifted and paddled all night until he finally hit Marsh Harbor Boatyard around 4 in the morning. A guard called the cops. He has stuck to that story ever since. His lawyer, Terrell Butler, has gone on record saying he is completely heartbroken over losing the woman he was married to for 25 years. She says he flatly denies having anything to do with her death. She also pointed out, and she is right, that there is zero physical proof of a crime because Lynette's body was never found. A friend told Fox News that the dinghy was honestly too small and underpowered for those kinds of rough conditions. Data shows that winds were gusting at roughly 26 knots that night. A friend noted that weather like that can tear two people apart in seconds, no matter their swimming skill. He said the engine kill switch setup is standard gear for any driver, and strictly speaking, Brian's version of the story holds water. That friend is convinced it was just a freak accident in rough seas. That perspective deserves space here. It is part of the file. Brian Hooker is not charged. And the defense's side, the claim that April 4th played out exactly as he described, needs to be laid out clearly right alongside the rest of the facts. But it doesn't account for that morning on the Soulmate, 18 months earlier. It fails to explain why a man who supposedly watched his wife perish, accidentally in a boating mishap, admitted, a year and a half before she vanished, that he wanted to toss her overboard. That's a question for the investigators, and the case remains wide open. Lynette's daughter, Carly Asworth, hasn't backed off from what she told the police and the reporters when this first broke. She has been incredibly consistent. She told Fox News there is a documented trail of Brian getting violent with Lynette and threatening to throw her into the ocean. Between his past, the possible child abuse, and him choking my mom out, she also told CNN that the whole vibe of Brian's call the morning he reported Lynette missing felt completely wrong to her. It was flat, matter of fact, like he was just delivering data rather than living through a nightmare. In that CNN interview, she asked why he didn't even bother dropping the anchor to search. Why didn't he just stop, throw the anchor down, and look for her? Carly questioned why he'd paddle in the opposite direction from where Lynette supposedly went in. She said, "If my partner fell in, I'd be losing my mind and going after him." She gave the Coast Guard every single detail she had. She even hired her own lawyer. They interviewed her for 2 hours. She is far from a bystander in this whole investigation. In January 2026, Lynette told Carly point blank that Brian threatened to toss her off the boat in 2024. This wasn't some old memory Carly was trying to piece back together years later. It was a real conversation with her mother just 3 months before she disappeared from that vessel. A very real threat, shared in the moment with the person most likely to remember it vividly. And there was one more thing Carly said on Fox News that hasn't really been given enough weight. She stated, "I have literally seen him choke one of his daughters before, and we had to go to court for it." I've seen him choke out one of his daughters before, and we had to go to court for that. And that refers to a 2006 Kent County, Michigan child abuse case that went to a jury and ended in an acquittal. Not guilty is the legal verdict. That is the fact, and it is stated here plainly. But the point is, it went to trial. A prosecutor saw the evidence and decided it was worth putting in front of a jury. And Carly Asworth, having been there for at least some of what led to that trial, linked it directly on camera, on the record, to the pattern she'd witnessed for years while watching Brian Hooker in a relationship with her mother. Detectives don't just hunt for one big explosive moment when they're digging into a case like this. Instead, they're looking for a common thread that ties different events together over the years. It's a trail that doesn't just show random drama, it shows things getting worse. You see the same kind of violence hitting the same victim, becoming more intense and more targeted as time goes on. For this specific case, that trail starts way back in 2006 with a child abuse charge in Kent County over in Michigan, which actually ended with a not guilty verdict. That's the official legal record. But the fact it even went to trial matters because it means a prosecutor looked at the proof and decided it was worth fighting for. Documentation existed. A report was filed. It was substantial enough to make 12 strangers sit in a jury box and listen. And it doesn't stop there. Fast forward to 2015. A blow-up at a home in Kentwood, Michigan, where both sides claimed the other started swinging. Judges tossed it out. There just wasn't enough proof to say who threw the first punch. Yet, if you look at the actual police report, there's a specific detail. Lynette Hooker told the cops her husband hit her in the head and then tried to choke her. See that word? Choked. It's right there in black and white. A specific accusation documented by police 11 years before she vanished. The pattern picks up again about 18 months ago on their boat, the Soulmate, out in the open ocean near the Bahamas. He went for her throat. She said she felt something in her neck actually pop. She didn't leave, and by the next morning, he was telling her he should have just finished what he started. Then we get to January of 2026. Lynette confided in her daughter, Carly, about a threat Brian made in 2024 to toss her overboard. We're not talking about ancient history here. This was a threat from the year before, told to her kid just 3 months before she went missing. The trail hits its most recent mark in March of 2026, a one-way flight home that she bought but never boarded. And finally, April 4th. When detectives talk about pattern evidence, this is exactly the kind of sequence they're looking at. It's not just one ugly fight in a decades-long marriage. It's a paper trail going back years where the same victim is targeted with the exact same brand of violence, using the same tactics over and over, with the danger level only going up. That 2006 acquittal doesn't change the fact that a trial actually happened. The 2015 dismissal doesn't delete the record of Lynette telling the cops he choked her. And that unused plane ticket doesn't just disappear because she wasn't on the flight. Every single one of these moments is a real event, and when you connect the dots, that line points straight to April 4th. That's the timeline, and the cops are tracing it right now. Brian Hooker sat in a Bahamian jail from the night of April 8th until the 13th, almost a whole week. While they were grilling him that Friday, his lawyer, Terrell Butler, told NBC News that the questions were all about him hurting his wife and causing her death. He told them he didn't do it. He's still saying that today. Butler mentioned that being locked up for that long has been really rough on her client. According to her, he's absolutely devastated and just wants to find Lynette. By April 13th, the Royal Bahamas Police Force let him go after the prosecutors there gave the okay. But listen to the specific wording they used. Released pending further investigation. He isn't cleared, he isn't off the hook, and the case definitely isn't closed. He's out for now since the probe needs more time. Brian Hooker is still the main suspect. As for his passport, if he's actually allowed to exit the Bahamas, that part was still a big question mark when he walked, especially since his lawyer had to check with both him and the authorities. Meanwhile, the United States Coast Guard is running their own criminal probe, totally separate from what's happening in the Bahamas. Police grabbed the couple's electronics with a warrant. Now, whatever is hidden on those phones and tablets, from the things they Googled leading up to April 4th, down to the exact GPS pings from that day, plus every DM sent right before and after they reported Lynette missing, tech experts are digging through it all now. They're looking for any gap between his public story and what the digital trail actually shows. The Coast Guard sat Carly Aworth down for a 2-hour interview. Darlene Hamlet is handing over plenty of info. There is one public detail we really need to look at. Hamlet told the Daily Wire they actually found Lynette Hooker's Apple Watch, but not Lynette. See, an Apple Watch tracks your location, heart rate, and every single move you make 24/7. It knows if you're walking, standing still, or, crucially, if everything just stopped. If that info is still there, despite the water, and those watches are built to handle a soak, the feds might have a literal map of exactly where Lynette was and exactly what her body was doing during those critical hours. Brian says she was in the water. The numbers are either going to back up his story or they won't. There's just no middle ground when it comes to what that watch might reveal from the deep. Jennifer Coffender, who used to be with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, told Newsweek that digital evidence is basically the holy grail for a case like this one. She went on record saying they have to tear apart Brian's search history, and she really wants to know what he was typing into Google days before April 4th and the frantic hours that followed. Google history doesn't call a lawyer before it spills the truth. A GPS ping never lies. Timestamps on DMs don't change just because someone decided to flip their story for the public. Right now, those electronics are with the experts whose entire job is to squeeze every bit of data out of them. Randy Kessler, an attorney from Atlanta, who also teaches at Emory, and used to chair the American Bar Association Family Law section, told Nancy Grace that proving murder without a body is a massive uphill battle. That is the cold, legal truth, and it is why we are talking about it. But here is what Kessler knows. Like any seasoned pro in court, prosecutors have won circumstantial cases with way less evidence than what is already out there in this specific investigation. We have a statement naming the place and the way it happened. There is a history of behavior already in police files and from family members. Then there is the tech data, and a relative who literally went on a podcast to share what the suspect said. That is not just noise, that is a real case building up. On April 3rd, just 24 hours before vanishing, Lynette posted a photo of boats anchored in totally still, calm water. "Not going anywhere for a while," the caption read. She was just joking about being happily stuck in a beautiful place. That turned out to be her very last public post. Looking at it now, knowing about the month she'd been enduring and that unused plane ticket, the call she made to her daughter back in January, or that morning in the kitchen 18 months prior. Those words carry a weight she likely never intended them to have. Lynette Hooker wasn't building a case for the police. She couldn't have known. She did it for herself, as a way to survive her own life, a defense against the part of her brain that tried to play down the abuse. The photos she took of her own bruises, the texts she sent home, the January talk with Carly, that one-way ticket for March. None of these things are accidents. This is the paper trail of a woman who knew exactly what she was facing, who was trying to escape but just hadn't made it out by the night of April 4th. Now, the people running the investigation have pieces of that history. Darlene Hamlet is passing those text records along to the Coast Guard. They have the electronics. They even found the Apple Watch. On the Banfield podcast, Lynette's mother shared the details her daughter gave her about that morning on the Soulmate. It's all part of the official record and the detectives' collective knowledge now. Darlene Hamlet described what she'd say to her daughter if she had the chance. There was no drama in her voice, just the hollow, simple words of a mother who has run out of ways to hurt. She said, "I love you. I wish you would have just come home. I love you. And I really wish you'd come home." That right there is the entire case in 2 sentences. A mother who lived with a specific, gnawing fear for years, but never quite found the words to change things. A daughter who kept a private record to keep herself from forgiving the unforgivable. A ticket she bought but never boarded, staying for reasons only she knew. A husband who stood on that deck after choking her and admitted he regretted not killing her. A boat named Soulmate. An April night, dark water, and a woman who vanished. The file stays open. Both the Bahamian police and the U.S. Coast Guard are on it. So far, Brian Hooker hasn't been charged with anything. He denies the whole thing. His lawyer claims the proof just isn't there, and she might be right, at least for now. At least until the watch data and the search histories are fully decoded. The next few months will reveal if the physical evidence, the phones, the data from the watch, the forensic sweep of the Soulmate, actually backs up Brian Hooker's public story. That's the grind that happens away from the cameras. It's tedious. It's technical work. It doesn't trend on social media, but it's happening. And the investigators have access to a lot more than the public does. Now, investigators finally have Darlene Hamlet's words. It is a permanent record, left there by a 76-year-old mother who looked Ashley Banfield in the eye to share the truth of her daughter's secret. Words like those do not just fade away. They matter, even without extra proof. This is a direct memory from a witness with a name. It covers a very particular moment, involving one man on one specific boat. That same boat where Lynette vanished, just 6 weeks after her mother's nightmare turned real. But the fact remains, those 7 words are recorded now, spoken on the Soulmate 18 months before Lynette disappeared from that very deck. Her mother told the story on a big, national podcast, putting it out there for every detective to hear. Any prosecutor or future jury can now see exactly what kind of man was on that vessel. Lynette Hooker is still out there somewhere. If you care about this, if you want her family to have answers, share this. Every single click or share keeps her face in front of the people who might know. We will be right here tracking every new lead as things come to light. Thanks for being here. No criminal charges have been filed against Brian Hooker regarding Lynette's disappearance. He maintains his innocence and says he has helped the police. Everyone mentioned here is presumed innocent until a judge or jury says otherwise. What Darlene and Carly shared are their own personal accounts told to professional journalists. This film was created strictly for information and to educate the public. All data comes from official reports and named sources as of April 14, 2026. We used reports from CBS 8, WT, NBC, ABC, Fox News, the AP, Newsweek, CNN, The Daily Wire, and Ashley Banfield's own show. We are not making any claims of our own outside of what those specific sources have confirmed. As of now, the investigation has reached a chilling turning point. What once seemed like scattered clues is slowly forming a darker, more deliberate picture. Every recovered detail, every timestamp, every overlooked trace feels less like coincidence and more like intention. Investigators are no longer just searching, they are closing in. But with each answer comes a deeper, more unsettling question. The silence surrounding key moments speaks louder than any statement, and while the truth feels closer than ever, it also feels more dangerous. One thing is certain, this story isn't fading. It's building toward something no one is truly prepared for.